Palestinian issue, look, I mean,
the PA issue,
the PA was created out of Oslo in 1993, and the PA was created as a temporary agency for 5 years, which should have then transited to what would have been a Palestinian state. The PNA was created to offer its people two things: better lives and freedom. It could deliver on nothing. Now, obviously, it has to do a lot of its internal work as well, but the other flip of the coin is that Israel did not provide the conditions conducive for the PA to be able to move forward. So the loss of credibility by the PNA is also greatly due to the fact that Israel did not honor Oslo. On the contrary, it went on with creating hurdles to it being able to serve its people and serve the cause of peace. And just one example, Tom, I mean, both Sameh and I, Minister Shukri and I were in the room in February of last year when we started the Aqaba Sharm process. And we started the Aqaba Sharm process at the time with the hope of creating a pause of 6 months during which we'll have some confidence-building measures that would take us to engagement on political horizon. The Israelis in Aqaba and then a month later in Sharm el-Sheikh signed to a number of commitments, and the U.S. was in the room, and the Palestinians were there as well, and nothing was implemented. So now I think ultimately elections will have to be the answer that the Palestinians themselves they want to do, but in order to have elections, you have to have conditions conducive for elections. That's not there too. We have a new Palestinian government now, and we've been all of us engaging to see how we can help. And the new Palestinian government has asserted that it will be independent, transparent, that will ensure good governance system, and that must happen not just to convince the world, but to convince the Palestinians as well, and to be able to serve the Palestinians better. But if you bring the best government on earth and you entrust it with running the affairs of the Palestinians on the West Bank now, in the current conditions where economy is suffocated, security operations into Palestinian cities and towns, settlement growth and settler terrorism, confiscation of land, no economic horizon, no political horizon, they're doomed to failure. So the challenge in all of us, and we're engaged in that conversation amongst ourselves, also with our partners in Europe and the United States, how do we enable the PA and how do we enable an environment conducive for the success of the PA? Of course, when it comes to Gaza, it's a different beast. There are lots of other requirements that we touched upon that need to be there. But ultimately, everything's interconnected. We have to, again, go back to the drawing board. What is it that we want? We want a just and lasting and comprehensive peace. What is the path? I mean, what will achieve that peace? The two-state solution. Why are we not having the two-state solution? Because we have an Israeli government that says no to the two-state solution. We in the Arab world are offering, again, we have a goal, we're offering a plan, we're ready to engage with all our partners to make sure that we go to that end game, which will bring peace and security to Palestinian Israelis. But the one question that I would ask, and I'd like you to ask, is if we come up with the best plan ever, and all of us in the international community agree that this is the plan to go forward, and then Netanyahu and his government say no, what happens then? Will he face consequences? Because if he does not, he's going to continue with more of the same. So I think we really have to call a spade and say the party that is responsible for denying Palestinians, Israelis, the whole region peace must be held accountable, and all of us must come together to prevent it from dooming the future to conflict. And this is the quintessential question that we have not yet seen any answer to. And if we don't answer that, I think we'll be moving in the same cycle, and that would be an environment conducive to more violence, more conflict. And the amount of dehumanization and hatred that has come out of this latest round of confrontation, of the aggression on Gaza and all, is beyond description. And I think one challenge we all need to think about is how do we navigate around that once the guns go silent, and they will go silent. And we cannot navigate around that unless, again, we offer that big move, that transformative move that convince people that ultimately, finally, after 30 years of negotiations, the end game is near and we're about to get there.
For Mr. Shukri.
Well, on the issue of Iran, I think we have to look at the historical context of the region, a region that has been plagued since World War II with a great deal of turbulence, starting with legacy of colonialism, subsequently the Palestinian issue, the rise of fundamentalism, the Islamic State and its effects, the policies of regime change, the 20-year presence of foreign forces in Iraq. And all of this has been compounded by a sense of antagonism, revenge, hatred, and a cycle of violence. And all of this has an impact. And I think primarily the principles that were enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, which we all advocate, but do not necessarily interpret into policies, and the polarization that has occurred more recently with Ukraine and the Russian-Western divide have all added to the complexities and compounded the difficulties, and thereby the application also of the rule-based order and applying it consistently and devoid of double standards is necessary to create the environment. If the environment exists where there are a solution to the conflicts, and with the Palestinian issue being at the core of whether rightly or as a pretext, but we have to take it into account. A lot of the fundamentalism has utilized the Palestinian issue, and we see that when push comes to shove, it does not really support the Palestinians in the way that was projected on many occasions. So again, it is the resolution of those issues, a coalition to defeat the ideologies, radical ideologies, wherever they may exist, and an application without double standards, without an effort to project you're either with us or against us, so that we can address the needs of our people, address within cooperation, while maintaining sovereignty and while maintaining our ability to move forward without the infringement and without the expansionism that has been, unfortunately, a constant during these last 40, 50 years.
Professor Kwok, on the Iran question, it's sort of that mid-sized power. You talked about the states here staying neutral in the great power game. You talked about the great powers, coming into the region. Iran's right in the middle there. How do you see it? Its role in this?
Well, it's not something that I look very closely at, but I think it's clear that Iran, like the other countries in the region, have an incentive to move beyond the sort of the quicksand that it has been in for like decades. And I think there's so much potential in that country, and certainly it should be seeking to move beyond that. The question, though, is about incentives and what can be put on the table for them to feel incentivized to move towards the future that I think every country in the Middle East looks forward to. I think when I was in school, I think my image of the Middle East was a very different image from what I see today, right? So when I thought about the Middle East, I saw on the news it was the conflict, it was the war. And in fact, my desire to study international relations for my master's was because I wanted to understand how countries could be in conflict for so many years without resolution. Surely it couldn't be that difficult. But then I think as we moved along, as the region moved along, it was progressive. There was tremendous economic development, and so a very different image of the Middle East emerged. And of course, Iran would be a part of that different picture of the Middle East. And now I think it's, I guess, the fork in the road for the region and for the world as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, what happens in the Middle East doesn't stay in the Middle East, and it has the ability to destabilize the globe as well. And like going back to the poll I mentioned earlier, the Middle East crisis, Palestine and Israel, has been ranked in my region as the single most important geopolitical conflict for the region, beyond even, say, the South China Sea, which is a flashpoint in the region. So I think Iran should want what's best for the region because it's best for itself as well.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank all our panelists. I have to excuse particularly the 3 foreign ministers. They actually have to go work on actually resolving this conflict right now. Thank all of you for being here, and thank you all for staying.